The call came in just as I was finishing my evening workout at the base. As the leader of our four-man Frogman Corps unit, I knew that an after-hours summons usually meant trouble. I quickly toweled off and made my way to the briefing room, my mind already shifting into mission mode. Codfish, our comms specialist, was already there when I arrived, his fingers flying over a keyboard as he pulled up satellite imagery. Anglerfish, our marksman, slouched in a chair, his ever-present sniper rifle case propped against the wall. Largemouth, the newest member of our team, and our designated gunner, paced nervously by the door. I could see the anticipation in his eyes. This would be his first real operation with us. "Gentlemen," I began, my voice cutting through the tension in the room. "We've got a situation." I pulled up a map of North Denmark on the main screen, zooming in on a small village nestled between dense forests and marshy lowlands. All communication with this village has been lost as of 1800 hours today. 2 police units sent to investigate have also gone dark. Codfish frowned, his brow furrowing. Complete communications blackout. That's not normal for this region. Even if their main systems went down, they should have backups. I nodded grimly. Exactly. That's why we're being called in. This could be anything from a technical malfunction to... I trailed off, not wanting to voice the darker possibilities that were already forming in my mind. "Terrorists?" Largemouth asked, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Let's not jump to conclusions," I cautioned. "Our job is to go in, assess the situation, and report back. If there's a threat, we neutralize it. If it's a technical issue, we assist in restoring communications. Either way, we move fast, and we move quiet." We spent the next hour going over our gear and the limited intel we had. The village was small, population just over 500. No history of unrest or suspicious activity. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened. Until now. As we boarded the helicopter that would take us to our insertion point, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were headed into something far beyond our usual operations. The Frogman Corps had trained me for combat in any environment, from the icy waters of the Arctic to the sweltering jungles of distant lands. But something about this mission felt different. The flight was short and tense. We each retreated into our own thoughts, running through mental checklists and possible scenarios. As we neared the drop zone, I gave the team one last briefing. "Remember, we're going in blind. Standard formation, night vision on, and comms check every 5 minutes. Codfish, you're on point with the tech. The moment we're in range, I want you trying to establish any kind of connection. Anglerfish, you're our eyes. Anything moves out there, I want to know about it. Largemouth, stay close and watch our 6. The helicopter touched down in a clearing about 2 kilometers from the village. As we disembarked, the pilot gave me a nod. "Good luck, Kraken. We'll be on standby for extraction." The moment my boots hit the ground, I knew something was wrong. The air felt heavy, oppressive, like the moments before a massive storm. But there were no clouds in the sky, just an unnatural stillness that set my nerves on edge. We moved swiftly through the forest, our training kicking in as we navigated the darkness. But as we neared the village outskirts, we encountered something that no amount of training could have prepared us for. A wall of fog so dense it seemed almost solid. "What the hell?" Largemouth whispered, his voice tight with tension. I held up a hand, signaling the team to halt. The fog loomed before us, a writhing mass of gray that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Our night vision goggles were useless, the green glow replaced by static. "Codfish, what's our status?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shook his head, frustration evident in his movements as he fiddled with our communications gear. "Nothing, sir. It's like the fog is eating our signals. I've never seen anything like this." I took a deep breath, weighing our options. We could turn back, report the anomaly, and wait for reinforcements. But every instinct I had honed over years of combat told me that waiting wasn't an option. Whatever was happening in that village, people needed our help now. We're going in, I decided, my voice firm. Tight formation, weapons ready. If anyone feels anything unusual, you report it immediately. Understood. A chorus of affirmatives answered me, and with one last look at the clear night sky behind us, we stepped into the fog. The world around us vanished, replaced by a gray void that seemed to whisper with hidden voices. As we moved deeper into the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were walking into something far beyond the scope of our mission, something that would change us all forever. The fog clung to us like a living thing as we made our way through the deserted streets of the village. Our visibility was down to mere meters, and the eerie silence was broken only by the soft squelch of our boots on the wet cobblestones. I kept expecting to hear sounds of life. A dog barking, a television playing, anything. But there was nothing. Codfish, any luck with comms? I whispered, knowing the answer before he shook his head. Negative, Kraken. It's like we're in a dead zone. Even our short range isn't working properly. I was about to respond when Anglerfish held up a fist, the universal sign for stop. We froze, our weapons at the ready. Then I heard it, a soft shuffling sound, coming from the fog ahead of us. Contact front, Anglerfish murmured, his rifle already shouldered. The figure that emerged from the mist was wrong. It moved like a human, but there was a jerky, unnatural quality to its gait. As it got closer, I could make out more details. It was a woman, elderly, her nightgown soaked through. But her eyes were glazed over, pupilless, like frosted glass. Mom. I called out, keeping my voice low and steady. We're here to help. Are you all right? She turned towards my voice, and that's when everything went to hell. With a scream that sounded more animal than human, she charged at us with inhuman speed. I had a split second to make a decision, and I chose wrong. Non-lethal. I barked, even as I brought up my rifle. We fired taser rounds, the crackling electricity illuminating the fog. They hit her square in the chest, and for a moment, I thought we'd done it. But she kept coming, the taser barbs falling uselessly from her body. Largemouth reacted first, tackling the woman to the ground. But she was impossibly strong, thrashing and clawing at him with nails that seemed more like talons. What the fuck? He yelled, struggling to keep her pinned. That's when more shapes emerged from the fog. Villagers, all of them, but moving with the same unnatural gait, their eyes vacant and hostile. We were surrounded. Retreat. I ordered, grabbing Largemouth and hauling him to his feet. Fall back, now. We ran, the sounds of pursuit close behind us. The fog seemed to part just enough to reveal our path, almost as if it was guiding us. And maybe it was, because suddenly we found ourselves in front of the village church, its doors thankfully unlocked. We piled inside, slamming the heavy wooden doors shut behind us. Anglerfish and I threw our weight against them as things outside hammered against the wood. What the hell was that? Largemouth panted, his eyes wide with shock. Those weren't people, not anymore. Before I could answer, a voice called out from the shadows of the church. They are people, it said, heavy with sorrow. Or they were, until Nixie got to them. We spun, weapons raised, to find two figures approaching us with hands raised. One was dressed in the uniform of the local police, though it was torn and bloodied. The other wore the collar of a priest. I'm Officer Lur, the policeman said, his voice hoarse. This is Father Mickle. We were all that's left. I lowered my weapon slightly, but didn't relax. I'm Kraken, Danish Frogman Corps. What's going on here? Who or what is Nixie? Father Mickle stepped forward, his face pale in the dim light of the church. Nixie was a legend, a swamp witch from our oldest folklore. But now, he trailed off, shaking his head. Now she's very real, Officer Lur finished. She appeared in the marshes 3 nights ago. Golden eyes, arms like polished obsidian. By morning, half the village was changed. I exchanged glances with my team. This was so far beyond our training, beyond anything we'd ever encountered. But we were here, and these people needed help. "Tell us everything," I said, moving away from the door. The pounding had stopped, but I could feel the malevolent presence waiting outside. "Start from the beginning." As Father Mickle and Officer Lur recounted the horrifying events of the past 3 days, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the damp air of the church. They spoke of an ancient evil awakening in the swamp, of villagers transformed into mindless thralls, of a growing cult that worshipped Nixie as a dark goddess. "But why here?" Codfish asked, his usual technical confidence replaced by confusion. "Why now?" Father Mickle's eyes were haunted as he answered. "The old stories say Nixie was bound centuries ago by a ritual. But last month, some teenagers were messing around in the old part of the swamp. They found something. An old stone, covered in runes. They thought it would be fun to chip away at it. They broke the seal, I realized, the pieces falling into place. And now Nixie is free." Officer Lur nodded grimly. "And she's getting stronger by the hour. The fog, the villagers, it's all there. She's building an army." I took a deep breath, considering our options. We were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing an enemy we barely understood. But giving up wasn't an option. Too many lives were at stake. "All right," I said, my mind racing as I formulated a plan. "We need to find the source of this, the ritual site where Nixie was bound. Father, can you guide us there?" The priest nodded, though fear was evident in his eyes. I think so, but it's deep in the swamp, and Nixie's followers will be guarding it. Then we'll fight our way through," Anglerfish said, his voice hard. I could see the determination in his eyes, mixed with something else, a hunger for action that seemed almost eager. I pushed aside my unease at Anglerfish's tone. "We had a mission now, impossible as it seemed. We'll need to gather supplies, plan our route. Officer Lur, what kind of weapons do you have access to?" As we began to plan our assault on Nixie's stronghold, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were in over our heads. We were trained to face human enemies, not supernatural horrors. But as I looked at the frightened faces of Father Mickle and Officer Lur, I knew we had no choice. We were this village's last hope. Little did I know that our greatest challenge wouldn't come from the Swamp Witch or her followers, but from within our own ranks. The true test of our unit's strength and my leadership was yet to come, and it would cost us more than I could have ever imagined. The swamp welcomed us with a symphony of squelches and an orchestra of odd odors. Every step was a gamble. Solid ground one moment, knee-deep muck the next. Father Mickle led the way, his knowledge of local folklore our only guide in this nightmare landscape. The unnatural fog still clung to everything, reducing visibility to mere meters. I kept our formation tight, myself at point, Anglerfish covering our rear, Codfish and Largemouth flanking Father Mickle and Officer Lur in the center. The eerie silence that had blanketed the village was replaced here by a cacophony of unsettling sounds, distant splashes, rustling that seemed to follow our movements, and occasionally, what sounded disturbingly like human whispers. "How much further?" I asked Father Mickle, my voice barely above a whisper. The moisture in the air seemed to dampen even sound itself. "Not far now," he replied, his voice trembling slightly. "The ritual site is in a circular depression, like a crater. We should see it soon, if—" He trailed off, leaving the unspoken threat hanging in the air. As we pushed deeper into the swamp, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. It wasn't just the supernatural threat we faced. Something felt off within our own ranks. Anglerfish had been uncharacteristically quiet since we left the church, his usual sharp comments conspicuously absent. And there was something in his eyes, a glint that I couldn't quite place. We had just cleared a particularly dense patch of reeds when I saw it, a faint golden glow piercing through the fog ahead. "Hold," I whispered, raising my fist. The team froze in place, weapons at the ready. Carefully, I crept forward, using the thick vegetation as cover. As I peered through a gap in the foliage, my breath caught in my throat. There, in a circular depression, just as Father Mickle had described, stood a massive stone table. Its surface was covered in glowing runes that pulsed with an otherworldly light. Around it, figures moved, some in robes, others naked, their skin glistening with an oily sheen. Cultists. I retreated to the group to report what I'd seen. As I finished describing the scene, I noticed Anglerfish's hand tightening on his rifle, his knuckles white. "We need to destroy that table," Officer Lur said, his voice urgent. "It's the focal point of Nixie's power. If we can disrupt the runes." I nodded, my mind racing through tactical options. "All right, here's the plan. Codfish, I need you to set up a distraction. Something loud and flashy to draw their attention. Largemouth, you'll provide covering fire from that ridge to the east. Anglerfish, you and I will approach from opposite sides and plant charges on the stone table. Officer Lur, Father Mickle, you stay here. If things go south, run. Get word out about what's happening here." As I finished outlining the plan, I turned to Anglerfish. "You got all that?" I asked, a hint of concern creeping into my voice. He seemed distracted, his gaze fixed on the golden glow beyond the reeds. "Yeah," he replied, his voice oddly flat. "I got it." We moved into position, the tension palpable. Codfish gave the signal, a brilliant flare that lit up the swamp like daylight, accompanied by a cacophony of noise from some device he'd rigged up. The cultists reacted immediately, many of them rushing towards the distraction. I darted forward, using the chaos to my advantage. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Anglerfish moving too, but something was wrong. He wasn't heading for the stone table. He was moving towards a figure that had remained motionless throughout the commotion. As I watched in horror, Anglerfish dropped to one knee before the figure. And then I saw her, Nixie. She was terrifying and beautiful, her obsidian arms gleaming in the golden light that emanated from her eyes. With a gesture, she lifted Anglerfish to his feet. "Anglerfish," I shouted, abandoning stealth. "What are you doing?" He turned to face me, and I felt my blood run cold. His eyes glowed with the same golden light as Nixie's, his face a mask of rapture. "I see clearly now, Kraken," he said, his voice resonating with an otherworldly power. "Nixie has shown me the truth. This world is broken, corrupt. She will cleanse it, remake it. This isn't you," I pleaded, even as I raised my weapon. "Fight it, damn you." But Anglerfish was beyond reason. With inhuman speed, he brought his rifle to bear. I dove for cover as bullets tore through the space I just occupied. The peaceful night erupted into chaos. Cultists swarming from all directions, largemouths covering fire cutting through the air, and Codfish's frantic voice in my earpiece, demanding to know what was happening. I scrambled from cover to cover, trying to get a clear shot at the stone table while avoiding Anglerfish's unnervingly accurate fire. He knew all my moves, all our tactics. This was a nightmare scenario, fighting against one of our own. Someone who knew exactly how we operated. A scream cut through the din of battle, and I saw Largemouth fall, a cultist's blade buried in his thigh. Codfish was there in an instant, dragging our wounded comrade to safety, but I knew we were drastically outgunned and outmaneuvered. "Fall back," I roared, providing covering fire as Codfish half-carried, half-dragged Largemouth towards the relative safety of the swamp. I saw Father Mickle and Officer Lur retreating as well, the latter firing his service pistol with grim determination. As I prepared to follow, a bullet grazed my arm, the pain sharp and immediate. I turned to see Anglerfish advancing, his rifle trained on me with deadly precision. For a moment, our eyes met, his glowing with that eerie golden light, mine filled with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and grief. "This isn't over," I growled, before disappearing into the swamp's misty embrace. The sound of Anglerfish's mirthless laughter followed me, a chilling reminder of how quickly everything had fallen apart. We regrouped at the church, battered, bloodied, but alive. -1. Largemouth's wound was severe. Codfish worked frantically to stem the bleeding while I stood guard, every shadow seeming to conceal a potential threat. As the adrenaline of battle faded, the full weight of what had just happened crashed down on me. We had failed. Worse, we had lost one of our own to the very evil we had come to fight. Anglerfish's betrayal stung worse than the bullet wound in my arm. How had I missed the signs? Could I have prevented this somehow? But there was no time for self-recrimination. We were outmatched, outgunned, and running out of options. As I looked at the battered faces of my team, Codfish's grim determination, Largemouth's pain-filled eyes, the shell-shocked expressions of Father Mickle and Officer Lur, I knew that the real battle was just beginning. Nixie had won this round, but the war was far from over. As I began to formulate a new plan, one born of desperation and grim resolve, I silently vowed that we would end this nightmare, no matter the cost. The church's dim interior felt like a tomb as we huddled around Largemouth's makeshift bed. Codfish had done his best with our limited medical supplies, but the grim set of his jaw told me all I needed to know. Without proper medical attention, Largemouth's chances were slim. "How bad is it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Codfish shook his head. "The bleeding's under control, but infection's setting in. He needs a hospital. Kraken." Largemouth stirred, his eyes focusing on me with effort. Don't you dare bench me, boss," he rasped. "I'm seeing this through." I clasped his shoulder, feeling the heat of fever beneath my palm. "Save your strength, soldier. We're not done yet." Turning away, I surveyed our ragtag group. Officer Lur was cleaning his service pistol with mechanical precision, his eyes haunted. Father Mickle sat in a pew, lips moving in silent prayer. And Codfish was watching me, waiting for a plan, for leadership. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "All right, listen up. We've taken a hit, but we're not out of this fight. Nixie thinks she's won, and that's our advantage. We're going to hit that ritual site again. And this time, we're going to end this." "With all due respect, sir," Codfish interjected. "How? We're down a man. Anglerfish's compromised, and we barely made it out last time." I nodded, acknowledging the harsh reality of our situation. "You're right, which is why we're changing tactics. This isn't a military operation anymore. It's a desperate gambit." Over the next hour, I outlined my plan. It was risky, bordering on suicidal, but it was the only play we had left. Codfish would create an even bigger diversion this time, something to draw not just the cultists but Nixie herself away from the ritual site. Meanwhile, Largemouth and I would make a direct assault on the stone table. "It's insane," Officer Lur said, shaking his head. "You'll be killed." "Maybe," I admitted. "But if we do nothing, this spreads beyond the village. How long before Nixie's influence reaches the next town?" "The city. We end it here, or we don't end it at all." As dawn approached, we made our final preparations. I helped Largemouth to his feet, his face pale but determined. "You sure about this?" I asked him one last time. He managed to grin, though it was more a grimace of pain. "Born ready, boss. Let's go kick a witch's ass." We moved out under the cover of the lingering fog, Codfish peeling off to set up his diversion. The plan was simple. He'd rig up a series of explosions and flares, creating the illusion of a much larger force attacking from multiple directions. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. As we neared the ritual site, I felt a change in the air. The fog seemed to pulse with malevolent energy, and whispers echoed from the shadows. Largemouth stumbled, and I caught him, feeling the heat of his fever even through our tactical gear. "I'm good," he wheezed, but I could see the toll this was taking on him. We needed to end this fast. The first explosion rocked the swamp, followed quickly by others. Flares lit up the sky, and I heard shouts of alarm from the direction of the ritual site. It was working. Cultists were streaming past our position, heading towards Codfish's diversion. "Now," I whispered, and we broke cover, sprinting towards the stone table. The site was nearly deserted, just a handful of cultists remaining. They turned at our approach, eyes wide with surprise. I opened fire, dropping two before they could react. Largemouth, moving with grim determination, took out another. But as we reached the table, I saw a familiar figure step out from behind it. "Anglerfish, I knew you'd come back," he said, his voice eerily calm. His eyes glowed with that unnatural golden light, and in his hands he held a wicked-looking ceremonial dagger. "Nixie said you would. She sees all, knows all. Snap out of it, man," I shouted, keeping my rifle trained on him. "This isn't you." Anglerfish smiled, but it was a cold, alien expression. "Oh, but it is. I see clearly now, Kraken. Nixie will cleanse this world of its corruption. Why fight it?" Before I could respond, a scream rent the air, a sound so inhuman, so filled with rage and power that it seemed to shake the very ground. Nixie had realized our ruse. Everything happened at once. Largemouth, summoning strength I didn't know he had left, charged Anglerfish. They went down in a tangle of limbs, the dagger flashing in the dim light. I turned to the stone table, pulling a grenade from my vest. If we couldn't destroy Nixie, maybe we could at least disrupt her power source. As I armed the grenade, I heard Largemouth cry out in pain. Turning, I saw him on the ground, the dagger buried in his chest. Anglerfish stood over him, reaching for his fallen rifle. Time seemed to slow. I had a split second to make a choice: throw the grenade at the table, or save Largemouth. In that moment, I saw Largemouth's eyes meet mine. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, and I knew what I had to do. I lobbed the grenade at the stone table and dove towards Largemouth, tackling Anglerfish just as he brought the rifle to bear. We went down hard, and I felt something in my shoulder give way with a sickening pop. The explosion was deafening, stone shrapnel peppering us as the table disintegrated. A howl of fury and pain filled the air. Nixie, I realized. We'd hurt her. As the dust settled, I looked up to see Nixie herself materializing at the edge of the clearing. She was terrifying. Obsidian arms writhing like tentacles, golden eyes blazing with fury. But there was something else in those eyes now. Fear. Anglerfish struggled beneath me, but his movements were weaker, confused. The golden glow in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by dawning horror as he realized what he'd done. Largemouth coughed, blood bubbling at his lips. "Finish it," he gasped. I met Nixie's gaze, saw the uncertainty there. We'd disrupted her power, but for how long? She took a step forward, then another, those obsidian arms reaching for us. With my good arm, I reached for Largemouth's vest, fingers closing around a familiar shape, his last grenade. Our eyes met one final time, and I saw peace there, acceptance. "See you on the other side, boss," he whispered. I pulled the pin and held on tight to Largemouth as Nixie's shadow fell over us. The last thing I remember is a blinding flash of light, a wave of heat, and then darkness. I awoke in a hospital bed a week later, my body a mass of pain and my mind a jumble of confused memories. They told me I was the only survivor found at the scene. The village had been evacuated, the official story citing a gas leak and mass hallucinations. But I knew the truth. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I could still see Nixie's golden eyes, still hear Largemouth's final words. We'd won, but at what cost? The fog had lifted from the village, I was told. Life was slowly returning to normal. But for me, for Codfish, for Anglerfish if he'd survived, normal was a luxury we could no longer afford. We'd seen behind the veil, glimpsed horrors that defied explanation. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Nixie might be gone, but there were other dark corners of the world, other ancient evils waiting to be awakened. As I drifted off into an uneasy sleep, I made a silent vow. To Largemouth, to all those we'd lost. We would be ready next time. We had to be. Because in the end, the fog always returns, and in its misty embrace, nightmares await.